this week, I am stoked that there's actually quite a few upsets. The massive Grand Champions event by Scraw with over 4,000 players is of course the highlight of this week, but of course I also had a look at some other Limitless events. The first thing that's really been going crazy is this new double weather team. Now I'm not necessarily sure that it's like new, but it's really taking over as of recently. We basically see a Charizard Y and a Pelipper combined with Grimmsnarl, giving you two really scary modes, but then also you have the ability to just bring both and see what you need depending on the game state. I was watching some of these games where people were straight up just putting Pelipper and Charizard both in the back, and then you can start with your Pelipper doing some damage or swap it in early, and then in the late game you can still bring in Zard, turn on the sun and go crazy that way. Of course you can also play without Zard, which is Grimmsnarl, Pelipper, Archbask, and so it's just very hard to predict what exactly this team is going to do. So you can see right here in the Grand Champions tournament we had a bunch of results, but we also had some of these results in the other big Limitless tours. Right here, for example, WB, you can see they scored very well in two different tournaments with this same team. We also see some of the best players in the world right now trying this team, so that tells you something. We see Fede Campo right here. Checking out like the specifics, Grimmsnarl is playing a pretty classic set, though of course it no longer has Thunder Wave, so now we see a Parting Shot instead. Charizard is the most normal set of all time. Pelipper is a pretty normal set, except for the fact that it's Citrus Berry instead of the typical Focus Sash, because Venusaur needs your Sash. It has Wide Guard over Protect, because Wide Guard of course is very spooky if you're afraid of stuff like Rock Slide, Dazzling Gleam, Earthquake maybe for your Archelodon. We also see Swift Swim Basculegion with Life Orb, and so overall this has definitely been the highlight team of this event. Now if you want to be the highlight of my life, you should subscribe to this channel. We're doing these meta analysis every single week. Another mon that's still going extremely strong is the Mega Blastoise. Last week we talked about the Mega Blastoise balance teams taking over, often combined with Delphox, sometimes with Floette, and so in this big tour it once again did very well. If you check out the win rate of the mons, and remember because over 4,000 players were playing, these win rates are very representative because there's just so many games being played at the same time. Blastoise was actually the second highest winning mon out of the mons that had a good play rate. So Blastoise actually very close to Floette in win rate, which is a crazy thing to say. And once again, also being piloted by some of the strongest players. Now, different from last week is the return of Toxapex. So yes, we actually see a bunch of Toxapex doing extremely well. Now, this is not new. In Regulation MA, we already saw some really good players, including Wolf, dominating with this mon. It was very well positioned against stuff like Charizard Y and Floette, which are of course the two best mons in the format. You could argue they're still the two best mons in the format, and so being able to just wall those is a very big deal if you can do it on a single mon. Funnily enough, it also walls Blastoise, so out of all the best mons, this thing just feels so safe. Of course, do be careful of the psychic moves from Delphox if you're going up against the Blastoise team. Now you might notice Toxapex is a bunch on the same team here, more on that later, but before we have a look at that, do keep in mind that if you want to start playing Toxapex, if you bring it to ladder, your results might be a bit worse than in tournaments. And the reason for that is that this mon takes ages. It plays Infestation, it plays Toxic, it plays Baneful Bunker, it plays all of these moves that do very little damage, but that adds up over time. And so if you're playing this on ladder, you might have a lot of draws. Remember, on the card ladder, if you time out, you will simply draw. It can absolutely be stalled to that, so you will not climb nearly as fast as with other teams, and your win rate might get worse than with other teams purely from all the draws. Now again, talking about the fact that this thing has been incredible on one specific team in particular, not discounting it doing well on some other teams as well, like you can see right here with Frostlass, like with Hydreigon, but it's really this team with Annihilape. So yeah, actually pretty stoked that Annihilape is doing well. Because Regulation MB felt a lot like Regulation MA, a lot of people weren't so stoked, so we saw Grimmsnarl doing decent, we saw Swampert doing okay at one point, but it's cool that one more mon is actually doing something. So on this particular new team style, and I think this team together with the double weather team are really like the newer highlights, it's really cool that it's doing something. So we are seeing a Charizard, Venusaur, Toxapex, and Annihilape. Now, if we take a closer look at the mons that they're running, the Charizard set, by the way, is just classic one, but with Helping Hand over Solar Beam. I'm guessing a pretty big reason for the ape is that this team's biggest threats are really weak to Incin. Choice Scarf Garchomp can be faked out, it can be intimidated, you're not really dealing dealing much damage to Incin with Charizard either. Incin walls other Incin. You can do parting shots, so Toxapex isn't as big of a deal. Venusaur, I guess, can Earth Power you, which is cute. But so in general, a team that's relying often on Garchomp and Charizard for damage really doesn't like to see an Incin coming. And so this Annihilape basically tells it, think twice if you want to bring Incin. The Define boosts are gonna hurt, it can't be faked out, it can close combat it. Rock Tomb is also pretty cool speed control. And with Focus Sash and Phantom Force, it can be really hard to actually beat it in an endgame. So overall, really cool innovation. Annihilape is doing something, and I'm stoked to see that. Now, an underrated gem is Vivillon. If you look at the win rates, and again, this is a massive tournament with insane amounts of games, so these numbers are going to be quite representative, you can see that its win rate is actually right after Zard, you know, right under Toxapex, right under Zard, you have Vivillon. Higher win rate than Kingambit even. Very close to the Floette and the Blastoise win rates. Of course, we see a Quaquaval, but it only has 2. So, you know, we don't really have to count that. But with 336 wins and 288 losses, I would say that's pretty representative. So yeah, Vivillon, while it's not in the top 8 or anything like that, it is definitely a mon to keep in mind. And whenever I have to face it, I'm pretty scared. Next, we have a pretty underrated team that I wanted to highlight. Now, if you don't know, Snorlax Pikachu is the NAIC finalist in the seniors division that basically destroys masters for breakfast constantly. I featured his work on the channel before. He's just a cracked player. He has been playing different tours with his team and doing extremely well. He won the Alpensee tour with it, and then he got top 16 at this massive 4,000 plus player tournament as well. So that is extreme consistency with a team that seemingly is full of shit mons. I mean, no offense, but you see Blaziken, Lycanroc, Alolan Ninetales, and Venusaur. These aren't bad mons or anything like that, but if you had to make a tier list right now of the best mons, it's, you know, Garchomp, Kingambit, Floette, Charizard, Basculegion, you know, these types of mons. These 4 are definitely a tier below that. Maybe some of them even 2 tiers below that. And so usually a team really only gets away with playing like 1 or 2 of these. This team has 3, or some would argue 4. Once again, showing that mons aren't necessarily bad in a vacuum, but that the context matters a lot, because you take these 3 mons that on their own might be a bit underpowered, and you put them together and you get something incredibly powerful. Lycanroc has been pretty good on the Frostlass stuff. And so if you think about it, really, if the Blaziken is doing Sneasler things and the Alolan Ninetales is doing Frostlass things, we just have the Sneasler, Kingambit, Frostlass, Lycanroc team right here. But it's very different mons, so you can't just compare it that way either. Overall, a really cool team. I wonder if we'll see more of it, but definitely one player scoring extremely highly in 2 big events back to back like that, it's something to keep in mind. And of course, Blaziken is really cool. Now, the next talk, of course, if we look at the top 8 of this massive tournament, there's one thing that just keeps on coming back and back and back. And that is Zard, Zard, no Zard, 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 Zard. So 7 out of 8 Zard. That is crazy. The best rain team has a Zard on it. That's how bad it is. So has MB fixed this issue? Well, clearly not. It is Zard's world and we are living in it. That has been the case for MA as well. And so that is basically what you're going to be looking at if you're going to Worlds. Which brings us to our final point, and that is Floette. If we look at win rates, Floette had the best win rate of all the actually played mons. And that has been the case for almost every event ever. But by top 8, they were all gone. And even in the top cut in general, there were some, but not a huge count either. And again, at these highest levels of play, it's not like anyone is missing a Floette. They all have Floette. If they wanted to play Floette, they would have. Somehow, while Floette is the most winning mon in the whole tournament, at the very highest levels, it doesn't seem to be converting quite as well. And now for 99.999% of players, that might not matter, of course, because most of us will just be playing in the overall tournament. It is probably gonna matter for Worlds, because at Worlds the very best players are going to be playing, and so a lot of the Worlds gameplay might look like some of those later rounds of this big event. Now, this is not me trying to predict that Floette will do bad at Worlds, by the way. I still think Floette is absolutely broken. It's just that we might have to be mindful of the fact that Zard might just be so good and Floette just naturally gets walled by it, and Zard naturally wants to float to the top because it is just so much better than everything else, that we might see more underperformance of Floette at the very, very, very highest level. At the same time though, just like with Caloric Shadow, if you underestimate Floette for 1 second, it will be back. Let me know your thoughts of Floette versus Zard and what this could mean for Worlds in the comments down below, and be sure to subscribe. I will see you soon. Ciao.